Welcome. This is another episode of the Know Your Numbers podcast. This is your host, Chris McCormick, and today's guest is a special one. He goes by the name of Jeff Custer. He is on a mission to, quite frankly, solve the leadership crisis that we see in a lot of our organizations and corporations. He will definitely give a much better introduction to himself, but he's out there in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, and I'm pleased to bring him to you. Jeff, welcome to the show. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit.
Chris, thank you. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. I'm really excited to have the chance to just share with your listeners. The story I like to tell about myself, I've been in leadership roles for probably over 30 years.
Okay.
And in the last 15 years, I've really focused on leading other leaders. And so I'm always on the lookout for who's that next leader that's in the organization that you can identify and you can develop and bring in and really help them be successful. And so I've developed this passion for developing leaders. And, kind of the thing that I end up talking about is over the years, I thought, boy, I want to share that passion with more people.
Yeah.
And kind of in my thought process, what always ended up happening was it always involved me being a consultant, getting on an airplane, flying somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, I don't really want to do that. That's not my passion, is flying on an airplane, doing conferences somewhere. And so I always kind of put that idea on the shelf and thought, I don't know. And about a year ago, I thought, how can we take that passion and expertise and get out to people? And I pulled that idea off the shelf and said, well, how about if we packaged it up and we marketed it online so people around the world could benefit from our expertise, and I can talk with them, on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting. I don't have to go actually see them. And in this last couple of years with the pandemic, the whole world's kind of changed how we communicate with each other. And so that really is kind of the genesis of what we're doing with our business.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that. I love the way you put it with the Genesis tie, and obviously I'm excited to see where it goes. And it's honestly, Jeff, something that's near and dear to my heart because I think, I said it a little bit. I do believe there's a bit of a crisis of leadership in our country, in the small and large organizations. And quite frankly, I think people like you need to do what you're called to do and help us solve it. So I can't wait to dive into this topic. I'm curious though, is your headline deals with toxic leadership and solving the toxic leadership. So I would love to hear what your definition or what makes, in your eyes, a toxic leader versus a successful leader, and one that has the traits of a good leader.
Yeah, I actually, Chris, how I put that is I think really toxic leadership is kind of a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you bring that term up with a lot of people, the picture they have in their mind is of a boss yelling at an employee in front of other employees or in front of a customer. And certainly those people are out there, and that's certainly toxic. But I think there's a whole spectrum. I think there's things that are a lot more subtle. I think there are leaders that maybe are poor communicators. And because of their poor communication abilities, it becomes toxic. An example I like to use there, one of my favorite things to do and to recommend for leaders is to have one-on-one meetings with their employees every month, versus the once a year performance review that a lot of the listeners are probably familiar with.
Yep.
And I think if leaders are just relying on that once a year, not giving a lot of feedback, not good at receiving feedback, even though those aren't me yelling at you, they still can be pretty toxic behaviors because the employee doesn't really know where they stand. There's not a good feedback mechanism. And so that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. That's pretty subtle, but I think can be really toxic in an organization. And then there's all kinds of things in between.
Right. And I'm so happy you brought that up because I think that's something that is often overlooked. And I think it's escalated a bit now that we're in this time of the pandemic. People have lost the ability to communicate, one, in person, and two, just in general, and it's disheartening for me. I love communicating. I love hopping on a Zoom. I love being in person and talking with others. But then when you come across that person who struggles, and it's like pulling teeth almost, or maybe they're in a leadership role and you're trying to relate with them, it can be troublesome. And I feel that both in my history with organizations and just in some relationships I have outside of work. I would love another topic you touched upon was when you look in an organization and you see that young leader, the person who you know to be somebody who has a bright future and can lead by example. I'm curious as to what the traits are that you look for and how you know that, because it's got to be more than intuition. There's some traits that are probably.
Yeah, I think like one of the things I've always encouraged leaders I work with to do is probably first off is you have to have people that have that aspiration.
Mm.
I think they have to want to be a leader. I've worked with people where I've kind of, you talked about that intuition, that gut feeling. It's like, I think they have what it takes to be a leader. And you go talk to that person and there's like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
right away, it's like, okay, if
Mhm.
that's not your aspiration, then certainly, we're not going to try to force you into doing that. So I think that's one thing, is you have to have
Yeah.
people that have that aspiration for leadership. And I think probably one of the big things I look for is how effective that they are at building relationships.
Mhm.
Maybe that's really the bedrock of a lot of this is even if you're not in a leadership role, for you to be effective in anything you do, it really revolves around relationships. And in leadership, it probably takes on even more magnified
Mhm.
amount of relationship building. You've got to have relationships with people that work for you, people that are your peers. You have to be able to have good relationships with people above you and other parts of organizations. And so when I can see people that seem like they have good relationship skills, we already talked about communication. I think
Mm.
those are a couple really key things I look for. And I see those things in people and think those are skills that are transferable into being a leader.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The aspiration thing is really comes to mind, and I'm curious, Jeff, if that was something, because you're obviously a leader and you have aspired to be a leader and you have led. I think I saw close to 600, maybe even more
Yeah.
employees of some sort. Was that always something that you were looking to do, or did it kind of come with time? Were you always driven to provide some insights and lead by example, I guess?
Yeah, I think what I think a great question. I've reflected on that, and in some ways, I've always seems like ever since I was young, I felt like I should be in the lead.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think, interesting. And a story I'd tell you about that is earlier in my life, for a period of years, I owned my own business,
Yep.
and we ended up selling that business. And it was a small operation. It was me and two employees, and I made all the decisions.
Hmm.
What kind of pencils we bought to $100,000 transactions, I decided everything. And then we decided to sell that business, and I went to work for a large company in a more of an individual contributor role. It was so frustrating for me,
Yeah.
because the only thing I decided to do was what I was going to eat for lunch.
Yep. Yeah.
And it while it was a good job, it just kind of ate at me. It's like, I miss that. I miss that being in charge.
Yep.
And so I think it's just kind of been something in me for a long, long time, that just felt like that what I was supposed to do.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I can tell by that. And I know the feeling too of not having those decisions, being a decision maker and knowing that you're a decision maker, but not being able to make those decisions. It can be discouraging, but also props to you, Jeff, because you stuck it out and then you found some place where you could be you found yourself in a position where you could make those decisions and
Yeah.
lead. So, for somebody that might be in that corporate environment and they're struggling, they know that they have more out there. They know that they're supposed to be building stronger relationships, but maybe
Yeah.
they don't think that business ownership or entrepreneurship or these big trends that we're seeing right now are for them. What would you say to them as a word of encouragement or piece of advice to kind of manage the corporate world hierarchy, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I've had a lot of discussions with people about office politics.
Yeah.
It's a fun topic to bring up because it gets people really worked up.
Yeah.
And people have, I've had people respond when you start talking about that, and they'll say things like, I would never play office politics. And I always say back to them is that whether you want to or not, you are.
Yeah. Yep.
And the real question is with integrity, how can you learn how to play that game effectively?
Wow. Yep.
And so I think that's, I think there's a little bit of that maybe goes back into your question around people getting those skills on navigating through all the corporate politics.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of one of the other things that I talk about is, people get frustrated because I didn't get the job because, I got the best resume and I didn't get the job and somebody else did. And it's not right because they knew the right person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell them it might not be right, but it is the way it is.
Yep.
And so get over worrying about whether it's right or not and figure out who are the people I need to build relationships with that when those opportunities come up puts me in a better place to take advantage of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's a good place to kind of pause and have somebody think about what's going on in their life, because that can relate to anything, both organization related or just life in general, right? It is what it is. Like some things are going to happen. They're not going to go your way. They're not going to be something you always agree with. But how can you respond? Who can you put yourself in front of? What can you do to make the next time an opportunity comes your way more rewarding? And it sounds like that's what you're teaching people to do.
I think, Chris, I mean, I think, and it really goes back to relationships. I can think back on a time in my life where my resume shouldn't have gotten me a job that I got.
Yep.
But because I built a relationship over a long period of time with the hiring leader, I ended up getting the job. And actually at the end of the day, even though on paper, people might've looked and said, well, you shouldn't have gotten that job. I still say when I was done with it, I was very successful in it. I was confident I could do it, but you kind of know how that is. On paper, it's like, oh, well, you don't meet this minimum requirement or that minimum requirement. You shouldn't have that job. And so the relationships do matter.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And that's, I think that's something important to remember is you mentioned the longer time period that it took to build up that relationship. And for the audience, most of them fall into the generation of 20 to 29-year-old. We come from a generation where we kind of expect things to be right here, right now. And that patience that we all talk about is hard to come by. And I think for the listeners, what would you have to say to somebody who knows that it takes a little bit of patience, but they get discouraged at how long it takes and they haven't seen the fruit yet, as we sometimes call it?
Yeah, it's probably a pretty tough question.
Yeah.
Just trying to think, how do you respond to that person that wants it to happen faster? I actually had a young man that probably fell kind of I think into that category that you're talking about, probably that age group in that, probably that exact situation, really talented, a person that will get a shot.
Yep.
I still keep in close contact with this guy. He will get his shot. And I've just encouraged him. I said, you've got what it takes. You're the right person. You've got the right skills. Hang in there because your opportunity will come.
Wow. Yeah.
And one of the things I also told him, because I've felt this at many times, especially if we're kind of talking about a larger organization, is you kind of go along and you think, boy, the opening I'm interested in, that promotion I want, it's just not there. It's just not there. It's just not there. And all of a sudden somebody retires or somebody moves to another job. And all of a sudden that opening that you didn't think was ever going to be there is now there.
Wow.
And I think that's probably been my word of encouragement to that person was, you've got what it takes. you're going to get your shot. Hang in there, because it will happen.
Yeah, that's so good. And again, man, I think you're preaching to the choir, and that doesn't just serve people in an organization. It's that kind of, it starts in your mind, right? And somebody I usually tune into talks about you're one phone call away, you're one relationship away, you're one business
Yep.
partner away. And as long as you take that next step, it's all the more closer. And I think that's pretty much what you're summing up there, Jeff. And it's
Yeah.
really
You know,
encouraging. I think it's something everybody needs to hear.
Chris, if I could just add kind of top off what we've just been talking about in relationships and people that are trying to position themselves. One of the things that, that I told this guy that we were just talking about, and other people that work for me, is if you have aspirations to grow, what I want to help you do is be top of mind
Mm-hmm.
in the people that are going to hire you for the position you want.
Yeah.
So when the position opens that you want, and that hiring leader has that mental short list of, hey,
Mm-hmm.
who do I really want? Your name's on that top of that list.
Yeah.
And that's a relationship building I'm talking about, is how do you know who those hiring leaders are? Make sure that you do the things along with your leader, because your leader can help you a lot to position you to say, when it opening comes, I'm on the top of that person's list.
Wow. Yeah.
And you don't wait for it just to happen by chance.
Mm-hmm.
You're working at it all the time.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people, like I said, if your aspiration, if you have that aspiration and you're working for a good leader, they should be very, very interested in helping you get there.
Yeah. And wow, there's a couple things that I'd like to unpack there. And this conversation could go on for days, because leadership is something that is near and dear to my heart. I think everybody should be focused on it, regardless of where you're at. But you talk about being top of mind, and then what you need to do to be top of mind. And I'm curious if you have any actionable steps for somebody, whether there's like a blueprint that you use, or just recommendations like taking somebody out to coffee, or giving a gift, or just reaching out, saying hello, and reminding them.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good ideas. I think other things that I've seen people do and encourage people to do, and again, I'm probably maybe talking about maybe a little bit bigger organization, but if there's maybe a special project
Mm-hmm.
that's outside of your normal job duties, if there's maybe a team, maybe you're on maybe there's a process improvement team or something like that. Get involved in those things outside your normal day-to-day job.
Yep.
One of the things that's going to help you do, Chris, is it's going to get you exposed to more people in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just your area where you're probably known, all of a sudden people outside your area is like, oh, hey, I know Chris. He was on that team. He did a great job.
Yep.
And it starts to build. I think you start building kind of that reputation and that network. I mean, I think that's one thing that you can do.
Yeah.
The other thing I talked about, kind of that, you're kind of in cahoots with your leader. If you have a good leader, one of the things I've talked about, some of my blogs are weekly reports. Some big organizations make you do weekly reports, and we've debated about whether they're valuable or not. One of the things I've encouraged people to do, if your organization is making you do that,
yep,
one way you can make it valuable is figure out who are people who have aspirations to your organization, and make sure that you're recognizing them in that weekly report. So you need your leader on board to help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that one more thing. It's like, hey, Chris's name was in the weekly report. Look at the great stuff he's doing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that's getting put up higher in the organization of people's like, boy, Chris is in there all the time doing great stuff. And that helps you become top of mind.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's good, Jeff. And one thing I want to make clear, and something that's coming to mind now that we're talking about it, is that it's one thing to think that there's greener pastures out there, and complain about your current role and your leader and somebody who's above you. It's a whole nother thing to actually go out there and try to make a difference on it. Because I remember when I was in the corporate world, I would have that kind of negative attitude towards this isn't for me. I don't need to do it. But I wouldn't really do much about it. And I know there's people out there that are in the same position, I took the step and said, okay, why don't I just try and go and do it on my own, kind
Yeah.
of lit my fire under my butt by myself. But I know that there are other ways, and it's nice to see that that's something that you're working with, is kind of somebody who doesn't need to take that leap or that risk, and can really make their own path in a path that is also already
Yeah.
set out for them.
Yeah, I think, Chris, I mean, you bring up a good point, about the greener pastures is, I we're all humans, and I
Yeah.
just suspect all of us at some point or other are complaining about something.
Yep.
And if you're working in an organization, I guarantee you at some point we're all complaining about something.
Hmm.
And but I think for the listeners, think through that before you say, well, I'm leaving this place because it's so bad.
Yeah.
Think about that wherever you're going to go to. Let's maybe you're like you and you're doing it on your own.
Yeah.
If you're going to another organization, I guarantee you there's not going to be perfect either.
Right. Right.
And so I think it really is about, having individuals step back and say, what really are my personal goals? What are my goals? Where do I want to get in my life?
Hmm.
And how can I do it in this organization? Maybe eventually you say, well, I can't do it here. I'm going to have to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But, if you're, you kind of get to some of those maybe cliches where you kind of make your own path. I
Yep.
mean, I think there's things you can do to have others help you on that path, but it really is up to you.
Right. Right. And yeah, there's a saying out there that you're the captain of your own ship. You're the author of your own book. It's like that's very
Yeah.
true. And I like to think that we all have the opportunity to write a very good book, and it's up to us to go out and write it. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that you do it, because there's also so many people out there that say it's only in entrepreneurship that you can do it. You have to have a business, you have to invest, you have to take risks. But I love your point of view, Jeff, where you're saying no, not necessarily. It just takes a group of leaders and well-developed human beings who want to work together to achieve a goal. And
Yep.
together, when they do, good things can come, and it can be a very well-written book.
Yeah. Well, Chris, one of the things I see occasionally, is, read articles about all the people that are thinking they're going to go out and be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that, because I've done it
Yeah.
more than once. And so I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but I think it's so much more incredibly difficult than they imagine.
Yep. Yeah.
It's, and so, why do people work in organizations? There's a certain level of safety there.
Hmm.
In most organizations, every 2 weeks or whatever, your paycheck's going to come, and how much it's going to be. And, I remember owning my own business, and people would owe you money, and you spend all day tracking down people to try to get them to pay you.
Yep.
Well, in a corporation, your paycheck's coming, so I think,
Right.
there's trade-offs, and so I don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody.
Right. Right.
But that doesn't mean you still can't flourish, have a great career and a great life in an organization.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's a great point. And I'll add to that. And something that has been bestowed upon me was the fact that entrepreneurship at its root really means undertake. And so
Yeah.
who says that? The person who taught me that, they say that everybody in themselves is technically an entrepreneur. It's just a matter of what you are undertaking, and what responsibility you are taking up on, that you are going to hopefully pursue in an excellent manner. And when you do that, you reap the reward. So I think you do a great job, because it isn't for everyone. And while some people excel at it, some people also fail at it. And I do want to tailor this conversation a little bit in a direction, and going back to your business owner endeavors. Jeff, I'd ask, like, what have you learned along the way from you started a business shortly after your education, your graduate degree, and then you worked in the corporate world and did the leaders and raised people up, and now it seems like you're going back to the entrepreneurship and business owner world. And then in the middle of that, there's some investments that took place. So I'd love to hear a
Yeah.
little bit about how it all ties together and some of the big takeaways on your journey.
Wow. That.
As hard as that might be.
I mean, I think it's pretty interesting. So I'll just kind of start with where you started. We, meaning my wife and I, bought a small business, shortly after I've graduated from college. And
Yep.
I will just say this. I mean, I think I used to be much more cocky than I am today. And, my formal education is in economics and business. And so, you kind of, you're taught, hey, there's these rules of thumb that govern business. And,
Yep.
and, I was cocky enough going into that business, and it just kind of like, I remember saying to myself, "All those rules apply to other people, not me."
Yep.
And I was wrong. Those
Right.
rules apply to everybody. And we went into that business, undercapitalized,
Mm-hmm.
and it just it just really didn't work very good. We just didn't have the right capital structure to make things work. And the profit we made really all went back to the bank. And it's just like, I don't want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And so I think it was I think the best thing I learned out of that experience was that it's really good to be humble.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's for a person that probably had the big ego and kind of a cocky attitude about things, it was pretty good to be humbled, because I think that's served me well since.
Yeah.
And then in the corporate world, kind of already talked about how there's security. In fact, one of I don't keep a lot of paper records of stuff because I just don't like doing it. But one piece of paper I will never get rid of is my first pay stub from that corporation. I could go. It's sitting about 4 feet from me in a filing cabinet, and I don't keep much paper, but I kept that, and it really is that. I think what we were talking about in that, there's that safety. I knew that check was coming. I was keeping it, and so the cool thing, you talked about entrepreneurship, and one of the things I think I was blessed with in the time I was in the corporate is most of the time I was really allowed to almost be kind of an entrepreneur inside the corporation. And while you were talking through that, I always kind of felt like, well, I'm the CEO of my department.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to have leaders that kind of let me do that. They weren't micromanagers, and as long as I was getting the results that the business wanted, I was kind of left alone to run my thing. And so I always kind of felt, and it's probably a little bit of an attitude of, I'm in charge of my own thing. So I can run my own little business in this big corporation. And so that was, I think, really good. And I think then, probably just the last transition is, and kind of talk about investing. Like one of the things, I'll get you a little off topic, but one of the things the last few years that's become more and more important to me is my legacy. What am I leaving after I'm gone?
Yeah.
Not just financially, but in a whole number of ways, but in this particular case, financially. And so, the corporate world set me up to have, I think, a great retirement. Got enough money to retire. All that. That's, you run through all those. You probably have this being an accountant. You run through your financial calculator, and at the end, the thing's green. It's like, yep, good for me.
Yeah.
But I have some goals, personal goals, legacy wise, that are beyond that. And so really, kind of what's driving me in this new entrepreneurship, even at my age, is I want to use it to help build some legacy things that I have for goals.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And that's really, for lack of a better word, it's beautiful, Jeff. I honor and acknowledge that. And I'd love to hear more about that. I do want to be cognizant of your time, but do you have kids of your own that you're looking to bestow messages upon, or is it also the people that you're working with and helping out in their organizations?
I've got 4 children. They're all grown up.
Yep.
And as we're speaking today, the oldest is 30 and the youngest is 20.
Okay.
So
awesome.
So my kids are, I think, probably in that age group of a lot of maybe the folks in your audience.
Right.
And so it's I have so much enjoyed watching them grow up and become really successful young adults in their own right. And something I didn't mention about our new business is my 3 sons that are our oldest 3 children are my partners in the
Oh,
business.
no way.
And so that's a little bit kind of the tie with the legacy, is that we want to get the business going. And so I want to be able to just hand it over to them and say, here, this is part of this legacy. And it's just been a blessing to me to be able to have them involved. They bring skills that I don't have.
Mhm.
One of my sons is a great marketing guy, which I'm not.
Yeah.
He's the guy that fusses over what color of blue the logo should be. And I was like, I don't care, just pick
Right.
a color, let's get going. I've got another son that's really good on the IT side. So if you all that back end stuff for making websites work and all that stuff I don't know anything about, he just makes that happen.
Wow.
And I got another son that's just a great teacher.
Mm.
And so they bring skills, that I think really complement. And it's just been a lot of fun working with them on launching a business.
Wow, that's so good, man. That's so good. Well, they're lucky to have you. It sounds like you consider yourself lucky to have them. It's awesome to see that working out, and I wish you guys nothing but the best. I'd love to ask you, Jeff, how can our listeners help you out if somebody's looking to level up in their organization? How can they reach out to you? How can they find you and your services, and get in touch?
Yeah, did I? Yeah, probably one of the easiest ways is to get a hold of us on LinkedIn.
Okay.
We've
Yeah.
got a company webpage on LinkedIn called Level
Mhm.
Up Courses,
All right.
as well as my own personal LinkedIn, Jeffrey Custer. You can contact me on LinkedIn, so
Yep.
you can take a look at what we're trying to do. I mean, our tagline is ridding the world of toxic leaders. And I know that's a tall task.
Yep.
But that really is our passion. And so if there's listeners that are saying, I could, our organization can use some help in trying to improve toxic behaviors. You can get in touch with us via LinkedIn.
Yep.
I'm also, we just changed what our website tagline is, so I got to look it up. That's like I said, that's my area of not my expertise.
Yeah.
So let me find that here for you.
And just to disclose, we can link all of this in the show notes so people will have it right on their devices when it comes out. But
well, maybe I'll have to get it to you because I'm not seeing it. We ended up changing. I mean, one of the cool things, I mean, going back to my son, who's the IT guy, the platform we've got our course that sits on a platform that's not ours.
Okay.
And the company that's doing that is also a startup company, and so we're actually helping them beta test a lot of their software.
Okay.
So we've been helping them and trying to give them feedback on their functionality. And so that's why I can't remember the website, because they added some letters at the beginning because we're in a beta test.
Okay.
So it's just kind of cool. Some of the stuff that we get to do.
That's awesome, man. Well, I can tell that it's something that's near and dear to your heart. I can tell you're doing what you were meant to be doing. And before we get to the last minute question, which I ask all my listeners, I'd love to see if there's anything else that you'd like to provide, a minute or two of any last minute thoughts you might have.
Yeah, the probably one thing we didn't talk about that if people look at the resources that we talked about, one of the things where my passion really sits is taking that person that wants to be a leader or is a new leader and really helping them make that leap to leadership.
Wow.
One of the things that I've seen so many times is you have people that are star performers in their job.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're star performers, they get promoted into leadership. But what I think they fail to figure out, and people fail to teach them, is the skills that made them a star as an individual contributor are different than the skills it'll take to be a star as a leader. And I think that's where so many people really struggle. And I think that's the root of a lot of the toxic behaviors.
Hmm.
And so that's where my passion is to talk to people like that are transitioning into leadership and say, all right, we can help you understand what leadership's about, how to be effective at it, and we can keep you from becoming that toxic leader, or even just having some of those toxic behaviors that we already talked about.
Wow. Wow. That's a great way to put a period exclamation point at the end of the sentence. And Jeff, it's so good to see. Obviously, like I said, it's near and dear to my heart. I think we can all be better leaders in this world. And I love to see somebody like you out there looking to change it. So without further ado, Jeff, the final question that we ask all our guests, and this is a money related question, being it a finance related podcast, it is, what is one truth about money that most people regard as myth?
One thing that's truth that people think is a myth.
Yeah.
I got that right?
Yep.
Well, now you're going to make me really think. um, wow, that you're going to have to edit out all the silence
Hey,
here.
no, I love it. I love it. There's no pressure. I know you got something good.
I mean, the thing that comes to mind is that I like to talk to people about is, when you're young, time is your friend.
Yep.
When you're old, time is your enemy in regard to money.
Wow. Wow. I love it.
I
I'm
mean,
doing calculations. I think I know what you mean.
So I'm not sure that quite really gets at your question, but I think that's something that I see, younger employees I've been around, younger people I've been around, to prepare for the future today, I'll do that tomorrow or the next.
Right.
And pretty soon time becomes your enemy. And so if you can figure out a way to be disciplined when you're young, time will be your friend. And I've told my kids this, that way, when you get to be 50, if you say, you know what, I don't want to keep working, I want to go sit on the beach somewhere, you'll have the choice to do it.
Right.
If you don't do that, when you get to age 50, you won't have that option. You will keep working.
Yep. That's incredible, man. And that might be the best one we've heard. That's something I have not heard before. And I appreciate your wisdom and your perspective, Jeff. This has been an amazing conversation, and I know there are more conversations coming between the two of us. And I can't acknowledge you enough for what you're doing out there. If there's anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. But I just really thank you for your time, and can't wait to share it with everyone.
Oh, it was great. Chris, it was a pleasure to get to talk with you, and look forward to talking with you again sometime.
Amen, man. Thank you very much.